In this lecture, we are going to see a simple example of how we can throw standard exceptions. And we are going to look at this simple class here. The class is called students. It is going to wrap around an array of std strings as we see here. And in our constructor, we are going to grab 5 pieces of information, and each of these is going to be the full name of a student. We're going to grab this as an std string view type. We don't want to copy, so we are just going to view the string. This is why we do something like this. And we are going to forward each of these strings in the slots that we have in our array here. We have 5 slots, so we are going to grab 5 pieces of data. This is easy. And we have a destructor which is going to destroy our array. Because this is array allocated on the stack, we don't need to do any active memory management. So this is going to be destroyed the moment it goes out of scope. But the important thing in this lecture is this method here, which is going to give us a student based on the index that we pass in here. So we are going to look at the index and decide if the index is within the range that we support. Remember that we have 5 slots in our array here, so we only really support indexes between 0 and 4. If the past index happens to be out of that range, that's the test we are doing here, we are going to throw an std out of range exception. And you notice that really fits with what we are designing for here. This is the main message I want to convey. You have to make sure that the standard exception you use falls in line with what you are designing for. And the exception is going to be much more meaningful when somebody sees it thrown. They will know what kind of problem they are dealing with. This is good design you should strive for here. So if the range is not within 0 and 4, we are going to throw this exception here. And if the range is valid, we are just going to return our student here. And people will be able to use this information however they want. Once we have this set up, we can use our class in main. We are going to create our students object here and pass in the information. And here we will try to call the getStudent method. On the first line here, we are going to pass in a 2 parameter. This is going to be within our valid range because it is between 0 and 4. So this is going to work just fine. This is going to give us the information. But if we pass in something that is not between 0 and 4 inclusive, we are going to throw our exception, and we can handle it here. And if we hit the catch block, we're going to print out the message and see what was wrong here. This is what we are going to do in Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and do this. Here we are in our working folder. The current project is throwing standard exceptions. We are going to grab our template files pretty quick, and let's put them in place. We can open this up in Visual Studio Code by dragging and dropping here. We will have our main CPP file, so let's clean up a little bit. We can plug in our student class. This is nothing complicated. It is exactly what we have seen in the slides. We can pass in our data in the constructor. The data is going to be stored in our array here. We have a destructor, and we have our getStudent method, which is going to throw an exception. And notice the exception type here, it is out of range, and we can pass in a message to say what was wrong here. For the message here, we are going to say exactly what was wrong. We are going to say that the index is out of range and say the valid range. The valid range happens to be between 0 and 4 inclusive. This is what we set up here. Again, the focus of what we do here is this throw statement, and we are throwing a standard exception which really matches what we are doing in this program here. Let's go in our main function and try to use this. We can create a students object like we have on line 33 here, and we're going to try and get the student based on the index that we pass. So the first line is going to print correctly because the index is within 0 and 4. So let's try and build and show you that. We can pass this through GCC. The build is going to be good. As you see here, we can bring up a PowerShell window to run this. And if we run Brewster, we're going to see that we're going to print the name of the student at index 2. So 0, 1, and 2. The student at this index is Nikolai Chenko. And we can print this out. Our program is working exactly as we want. If we comment this out and use an index which is not valid, Remember, the valid range is between 0 and 4 inclusive, so -2 here is really not going to make sense. But this is going to throw the exception and we will handle it here, and our program is going to still work. It is going to run to completion even if we didn't get a valid piece of data out of this type here. Let's put in an stdc out and say and, as we always do, to make sure we know when our program runs to completion. And we are going to build this and see the exception thrown and handled in our main CPP function, in our main CPP file. The build is good. We can clear and run Rooster. We are going to see that we have an exception and we will have our message here. And this is really cool. We see that our program is going to end. And this is really a simple example of how you can throw a standard exception and handle it in your C++ program. Notice that again, we are using a base class pointer to catch this exception. This is going to enable polymorphism because all these standard exceptions use virtual functions to take advantage of polymorphism. And this is going to work pretty well. We are going to stop here in this lecture. In the next one, I am going to show you that it is actually possible to derive from standard exception and customize how they work to really fit your use case. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.